2x2 formation. Road change now, we go racing for the first time this season. 3 hours of GT action, it's go.
This is very tight as they come down. Group of cars coming in, this has all got trouble written all over it. This is G3 cars.
Drop downhill there, head towards the Aqua Minerale. Imola, of course. There's another one off through the gravel. As wide as possible as they drop downhill, putting that from the inside line. Yes, he did. Through he goes.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, depending on where you are joining us from. Welcome back to another Apex Online Racing stream here for round 3 of the Endurance Series, where we are, in a couple of hours' time, going to get underway for the 10 hours of Nürburgring. But before all of that kicks off, we are going to have the Superpole session, where the top 10 fastest qualifiers from the pre-qualifying are going to duel it out on circuit in a one-lap shootout each, to see who ends up taking that all-important pole position. Of course, pole position and grid position in general in an endurance race with many hours of racing isn't quite as crucial as it would typically be in a shorter event, but it can certainly keep you out of trouble in the opening laps, and staying out of trouble and staying consistent across that 10-hour period is going to be key for these drivers today as they look to try to score the best possible results they can. We're currently having a look at the 201 SBQ Racing Team, who are your championship leaders alongside the Remwelton Esports youngster team, who I believe, if I just pull up my sheet, they are driving the 444 car, which is this bright yellow McLaren right here. So both sitting on 88 points as it stands, and also not too far behind them is the Virtual Racing team in the number 3 car, as we get quite a far-field view of that car. The number 3 currently driven by Leonardo Porco. So very tight at the top of the standings at the moment. Only 9 points separating the top 3, and certainly we'll be looking to see how that all plays out during the endurance race today. Part 1 will be hosted by myself and Christian Romano, and it'll be just me for the Superpole session, I'm afraid, and then we'll be moving over to part 2 at the halfway point for Tim Lund and Chinson, who will take you through the latter 5-hour period. Just need to sort out just a couple of small things at my end, but all is roughly well. So we should be able to switch over to Superpole. Surely I shall give the cue to our wonderful admins that are running all of this in the background. Of course, there's a lot of hidden work that goes on behind the scenes for these events, and we are in a great deal of debt for all of their efforts. The fastest car in the initial part of qualifying went to the number 9 that is currently at the top of the standings in the practice session of Tadas Juknavicius, and they are currently 200s clear of the 444. So that's going to be very interesting to see how all of that plays out. And also in terms of our... Oh, that's a very big slide for the number 9. They'll be hoping to avoid doing that in the qualifying session, of course, as I was going to mention that in terms of our standings, our 2 race winners have been Virtual Racing Team and the current championship leading SPQ Racing Team, the 201. But the 444 is still waiting for their first victory. Very consistent performance from that 444 team, though. 2 second places in the first 2 rounds. So will their luck change today around the Nürburgring circuit? I have to wait and see, because it's interesting in terms of looking at the cars in our top 3 championship protagonists. We've got BMW, McLaren and Aston Martin, and each of those cars is pretty adaptable to different kinds of conditions, and it's that adaptability and the ability to have a car that, you know, drives well in all conditions and allows the drivers to really kind of execute confidence in the car that really has a big impact on the long-term consistency, not just during the races, but between each of the rounds at different circuits. Because with changing conditions of dry to wet, wet to dry, kind of those tricky intermediate conditions where the car needs to sort of work in that balance, having a car that's adaptable and easy to drive is very much important. Now that's likely why we're seeing kind of those sorts of cars at the top end of the field at the moment in the standings, because although they may not necessarily have the outright raw pace over a single lap or in general race pace, the consistency that the drivers can execute during the race is what then allows them to get those strong results. So that will be very interesting to see how all of that plays out. We will be making our way into the Superpole very, very shortly, as just checking in on a bit of a last practice effort from our championship leader at the moment of Marco Mancuso. Currently 3/10 up on his time, and that will put him very close towards the front of the pack. In actual fact, puts him on the top grid spot by a hundredth of a second. Excuse me. So that is a good amount of confidence for the championship leaders to be going into the Superpole session with. And the running order for the Superpole, it will first be the Jon Watts Esports Academy team in the 127 car, currently with Antonio Fedeli out on circuit. And then all cars will be reset to the pits, and then we will get underway. And just as I say that,
Green light, show them what you got.
we have exactly that, as we get a rather peculiar camera from the initial transition. But it will be this car that looks to set the pace first time around. Just having a look at where they sit. They currently sit 9th in the standings. Had a very good opening round of a 4th place position, but then 17th last time out at Suzuka. So they'll be hoping for a stronger result from today, and seeing if they can do anything to improve on that. Because we also saw the likes of, I think it was the Cracked Racing team at Suzuka, that almighty pace in the Honda, but it all unfortunately just kind of fell apart a little bit in the race itself. But they're still doing very well for the silver class category, but definitely Superpole won't be the deciding factor for where they finish in the race. There is so much that can happen in all of that. I'll have to see how they get on. It was a 53.692 for the Jon Watts Esports Academy that got this 127 car into their 10th place provisional grid spot and qualifying into this Superpole session. We saw a lot of drivers in practice really thrashing the brakes and the tyres of their cars, trying to get them up to pressure and temperature as quickly as possible, because you only have one out lap, and then that is it. Then you are having to commit to the fastest lap you can possibly execute. And it is tricky around here at the Nürburgring, because the final chicane in particular, we saw even the number 9 car, our lead qualifier coming into this, coming a little bit unstuck from all of that, because you really do have to send all sorts of commitment into here. And you see Fedeli being a little bit wary on his initial formation lap, but I'm sure we will see a bit more of a send in this attempt. Sets up a late apex for the final corner. So for the first lap of Superpole, then it's going to be Antonio Fedeli in the 127 car for Jon Watts Esports Academy, barreling down the first straight with that V10 sitting behind him. Trying to spot his braking point around the 75 meter mark. A little bit wide of that first apex, but gets it square and tidy on the exit now through into the Mercedes Arena curve. Got to be patient on the throttle here, careful on the exit with that AstroTurf. On a run too wide. Get that front left wheel hooked up into the curve through turn 3 and then into 4, taking a little bit of curb on the entry there. Again, another part of the circuit on the exit of that corner where you have to be careful, destroying the cones first time around on the entry towards turn 5. Get yourself over to the left hand side as much as you can. I've been wanting to get over there a bit sooner, but using the camber of turn 6 then to get the car hooked around onto this next stretch towards a Dunlop curve. Use that little bit of curb on the entry. Again, a little bit wide for Fedeli. It's been a bit of a scrappy run. Did not get close to the apex of where he would have wanted to go. See how it places him. Use that curb on the entry to the Schumacher S. Is careful of the gravel trap on the exit of turn 9. And then try to spot your braking. 100-meter board is roughly around where you want to be looking for. Nicely over the first curb, using a little bit of the exit curb, and then setting himself up for turn 11. Then Fedeli, maybe not quite the run that he would have wanted so far. He's got the final chicane to try to put it all together, and this can upset some other drivers, so he may still be in a good position. Try to spot his braking point. Nicely hooked up through there. You see, really pulls the car from side to side, something that the Ferraris likely will be struggling with a bit during the race for consistency. But Fedeli then, first car to come around, he's at a 53.635, so actually fractionally faster than their average time that saw them get into this session. So he will be relatively happy with that. But now it's over to Joris Appel for the 444, the Ren Welson esports team, currently your joint championship leaders. They've had 2 second places and they'll be looking to go one better. So the McLaren, how does that car fare? Similar braking point on the entry towards turn 1, clipping that first apex, very nice. You can see much tighter all the way over to the right hand side to open up this turn 2. And it already looks to be a more composed lap, but still 13 more corners to get through. Not quite digging the hills into that inside divot of the curb for turn 3 as much, but that's not surprising. McLaren not as accustomed to going into those sort of changes of groove, but really using all of the track that he can on the entry, playing with the gear shifts through there, and see much further over to the left hand side again, opening up all these corners a lot more than the 127 car did. Much better flow through each of these, so I have to see how that works out in terms of lap time. Tries to hit the double apex in towards the Dunlop curve and nails it perfectly there. There's a few lines that you can take through there, but really carrying the speed on the entry. Use the fact that there's that camber to help slow the car down, bring it back in to the right hand side, and then drive your way back up the hill fairly smooth through the Schumacher S's, braking around the 100 meter mark. Again, taking less curb on the entry, a bit more on the exit, a little bit of a wiggle. First kind of bit of scrappiness we've seen, and maybe a little bit wider at turn 11 than he would have liked, but all so far it's been a pretty good lap for the 444. Now this is probably going to be the scariest part of the circuit from the McLaren, not too well adapted to taking the chicane over the first apex, over the second. He heard a hesitation as he puts a wheel on the grass on the exit there of the penultimate corner, nicely through the turn 15, uses all of the curb on the exit, and for the 444 it's a 53.575 and goes up to provisional pole. Next on circuit is going to be the virtual racing team, now in the hands of Leonardo Porco in the Aston Martin C, setting himself up for a very wide line on the exit, tucked in towards the barrier to try to get as much speed down the start-finish straight as he possibly can. This car currently sitting in a P3 in the standings. They took a win at the opening round, only good enough for P6 at Suzuka. Will they return to winning ways today for 10 hours of Nürburgring? We'll have to wait and see. The Aston Martin, very adaptable car in a range of conditions. Very fast down the straights with the latest BOP changes as well, so that will help them try to make up some spots. But of course they won't want to make up too many. They will want to get themselves as high up the order as they possibly can. Porco being a little bit more pushing in the track limits around that opening section, and nicely committed. The Aston Martin rotates really well through these corners. There's a lot of confidence that you can get from this car. The traction control, the way that the power gets delivered, the downforce, the suspension, everything about this car just wants you to push it in every way possible. It may not be the outright fastest, but it does allow you to really extract performance. Leonardo, similarly to Joris Appel, nicely through the Dunlop curve. They're using all that entry curb, really pushing the AstroTurf on the exit of the Schumacher S's there on the run up now towards turn 10, almost taking out the barrier on the entry. Or we get a little bit of lag with the connection there for Porco. I'm sure at his end everything is running absolutely fine, but it looked fairly tidy. And now carrying that momentum all the way up the hill towards this chicane, all that pressure to try to hook up the perfect lap around here, braking around the 60-meter mark, taking visibly more curb on the apex, and the Aston Martin deals with it beautifully. It's been a pretty tidy lap from Porco, trying to get it tucked into that final apex. A little bit wide But what's it going to be for the number 3 car as he heads towards the line? It's a 53.395, and he goes up towards provisional pole, but now it heads over to the 202 car. The first of our SPQ racing team entries, one of the Audis. Got 2 Audis and 1 BMW, and it's the BMW that is leading the standings at the moment, but it's going to be Matteo Sinotti to see what he can do on his attempt in the Superpole session. A little bit of an earlier braking there for 202, so a little bit cautious on the entry, but does get himself tucked into the apex nicely. There's that, you see, there's that massive drop off in the altitude of the circuit on the apex. It can upset certain cars, but don't deal with that all too well. Sinotti looking to be a little bit cautious through this opening sequence corners. Maybe the Audi taking a little bit of time to build up the tyre temperature, more so than some of the other cars. But this will be parts of the circuit where the Audi does tend to shine, or that's a little bit wide on the entry 3 and a bit scruffy into, excuse me, 5, and then a bit scruffy into 6. I'm not sure Sinotti is going to be up there to challenge the likes of Porco, but still a long way around the lap to go. Hits that first apex, gets the Audi nicely rotated on the power, and that was good drive out of the exit there of the Dunlop curve. Climbing up the hill once more through into the Schumacher S's. Blend the throttle, almost catching the gravel there, just about keeps it together. Sinotti though having a little bit of a difficult time, and that almost completely went wrong. I think he just about kept it valid. I do believe if you dip a wheel into the gravel, that even though you lose time, I think it invalidates the lap, and I believe Sinotti just about kept it out of that, and that would be why he kept his foot out of the throttle as much as he did. So a 202 not quite having the lap that he would have wanted as he fared through the Schumacher S's. Does he send it all? Misses the first apex a little bit, chucks it through the second one. We'll see a variety of lines in terms of which parts of the final chicane they try to hit, but it's been a bit of a scruffy lap for Sinotti. Whereabouts is it going to place him? It's still good enough for the provisional front row for the time being. A 10th adrift of Leonardo Porco, but still a pretty good effort there from the 202. Now over to Marcin Oliars in the number 7 BMW for the URL team. And it'll be the first of 3 BMWs. The car looking a bit more competitive around this circuit in terms of outright pace than they were in Suzuka. Nicely on the brakes for turn 1. Lovely downshift sound in this car. I think one of the best downshifts. I think honours perhaps goes to the Nissan GTR, but sadly we don't see the GTR all too often, but the M4 certainly provides us with a nice bit of audio to listen to. See Oliars really nicely over that inside curb of turn 3, and that really drags the car around. That opens up the exit for turn 4 and gains you a surprising amount of time. They're whipping over to the right hand side for the entry, a little bit wide though of the first apex, and didn't quite get himself over to the left hand side in the way they would have wanted to see. Got a little bit upset on the run in towards turn 6 as well. So more time to find in this car, but he's kept up reasonably good momentum in the opening sector. How's he fare through a Dunlop curve? See, really nicely gets the car rotated. Did sound like the car bogged down a little bit in the middle of the corner, but he did get it nicely wrapped around through there. No such issues through the Schumacher S's for the BMW. Maybe approaching that part of the circuit with a little bit less straight line speed. The Audi, very torquey. BMW tends to have some decent top end, but it takes a bit more time to build up to it. A little bit of an uncommitted with a throttle input on the run in towards turn 11. Now a charge up the hill, then through the kink of 12. And how's he fare through the final chicane? Wide over the first apex, a little bit wider second, a bit of a wiggle through there, and then using that exit cup to really slingshot his way in towards the final corner. Nicely hooked up through there. Maybe could have run a little bit wider, but for the URL team it is going to be good enough for P5. And it's the last of our Superpole runners so far, not by a small amount either, so Oliars will be disappointed a little bit by that one. But now it's over to Nils Schroer in the 991 car for Garage 991, who currently sits 13th in the standings, 8th in the opening round, 20th at Suzuka. And I do believe they made it into the Superpole shootout as well last time out, but just didn't quite... Oh, that was a bit wide on the apex for turn 1 there. That's going to lose him about a tenth and a half at least. And that's put him off on a bit of an awkward line going in towards turn 2. And this is the problem with the Superpole shootout. You've only got 1 lap to try to hook it all up and put it together. And Neil Schroer not quite managing to get the lap they would have wanted. So both BMWs so far seemingly having some issues. Maybe a car that struggles with the warm-up phase of the tyres, as it does tend to be that the rear engine or mid-engine cars put a bit of extra energy into their tyres a bit earlier on. Maybe with exception to the Ferrari, with that car so reliant on its downforce and aero package, it doesn't mechanically thrash the tyres quite as much as some of these other cars do. Tidy though through turn 7 for Neil, so he is recovering the lap, perhaps just a little bit, but I think maybe that opening sector, the damage may have already been done in terms of challenging for provisional pole, but they will have 10 hours of course to try to work their way up the order and get themselves a personal best result. Nice and neat and tidy. A little bit of a wiggle off the exit of the curb, but nothing too dramatic. Slightly wide on the entry towards turn 11. And now the charge once more up the hill through the kink of turn 12. Even in the wet, that corner isn't too much of a problem. Maybe when you're on full fuel in the wet. How's he fared through the final chicane? Oh, that's a very big amount of curb through the second apex there. He does keep it together, but of course that's going to be an invalid lap, and unfortunately he left everything on the table there in towards the final chicane, really sent everything at it, and unfortunately not coming off for the 991, so that'll be provisional last place for them, as Giuseppe Diana setting up a late apex. I don't think he quite set that up in the way that he would have wanted, but still launches himself for a run, the second of the SBQ Racing Team Audis, the 203 car. Let's see how the Italian driver gets on. Hard on the brakes around the 70-meter mark, clipping that first apex, although understeering a little bit wide through there on the exit. You could hear the front tyres scrubbing, so he lost a bit of momentum there. That set him up a little bit awkwardly for turn 2. How's his fare in towards turn 3? Nicely over that inside curb, patient on the throttle, takes a good chunk of curb through turn 4, almost running all 4 wheels over the white line on the exit, but that is how you extract the most amount of pace through there. Not take as much entry curb as some of the other cars. You can see car dive towards the inside a little bit, and he's run wide in towards turn 6. That's going to lose him another tenth and a half, I'd imagine, because you lose all of that speed on the run down towards turn 7 there. Looks like this car has a little bit of a softer suspension, maybe to adapt its way in towards the wet weather a bit. Of course, they can use different setups between qualifying and the race, but perhaps if the drivers are a bit more used to using their race setup, they may have gone with that for qualifying. You can see that there was visibly more pitch in the car, and that did seem to upset it a little bit. The aero rake does then change of course with that change in ride height. Again, a little bit wide with mid-corner understeer, so it does look like this car maybe not activating its front tyres in the way that it would have wanted. Good line through turn 11. That will help out the Audi to recover some time as they look to charge up the hill through turn 12 then. How does this car fare through the final chicane? Goes down a couple of gears nicely through there. Maybe not as aggressive as he could be, but he knows that this qualifying session is not everything, but just wants to get himself up the order as best as he can. So for Giuseppe Diana, it's good enough for P5, slotting just ahead of Martin Oliars in the number 7 car. But now it's over to our championship leader car of the 201, the SPQ Racing Team BMW, in the hands of Marco Mancuso then. And see what this car can do. Both BMWs so far haven't fared all too well. What would it be like for the 201 car that has shown great consistency so far in this championship? I believe the only car alongside the 444 McLaren to have 2 podiums in the opening rounds. That is why they are where they are in the current standings. Fairly tidy through the opening series of corners, a little bit wider in towards turn 3 though than he would have liked. Takes a chunk of curb and had a little bit of wheel spin on the exit of turn 4 there as well. So the BMWs again not quite having the qualifying performance, maybe likely to be more consistent and strong during the race. A little bit wide through turn 6 as well, just doesn't seem to quite have the agility that we saw the likes of the Aston Martin of Leonardo Porco that sits on provisional pole, still by over a tenth and a half. That was a great lap for them. Mancuso nicely through turn 7. See what he can do on the run up through Schumacher S. Is this part of the circuit where the BMWs are quite happy and tidy. Good downforce on these cars, generally deal with the curves fairly nicely, and of course they don't quite have the same torque out of turn 7, so they approach it with a bit less speed. Makes it a bit easier to transition that throttle into a place where you need it to be. Through in towards turn 11, you heard a hesitation on the throttle and you heard the kick of the gravel on that back left tyre, so that's going to lose him quite a chunk of momentum, and it hasn't been the sort of qualifying lap that the 201 car would have wanted. Mancuso, though, how brave does he feel through the final chicane? Takes a good chunk of curb on either side. That was nice and tidy. That'll help him recover. Brings himself back onto the main part of the circuit off that exit curb before setting himself up for the braking in towards turn 15. Tidy through there on the run up towards the line. It's good enough for P5, just 17 thousandths, excuse me, of a second faster than Giuseppe D'Anna in the sister car, but not good enough for provisional pole. Now we head over to our last Audi, Mats Lindholm Andersen in the 49 car, getting a little bit bouncy and upset through the chicane, so we'll be hoping for a nicer run through there. This is the Race Anywhere SimSport car that debuted at Suzuka. They got a podium in their first race of the championship, and they'll be looking to see if they can go even better than that. How does Lindholm Andersen get on in this one, braking around the 75-metre mark again? Looks like the brakes on the Audi not quite as strong as the likes of the Aston, also likely maybe approaching that corner with a bit more speed. Nicely though through turns 1 and 2, then the car drift wide and then bring it all the way back across to turn 3, dancing around that inside curb. Maybe would have wanted to have been slightly tighter. Takes a chunk of curb on the exit 4, but picks up good speed through there. So it's been a pretty good first sector so far. Now on the run up towards turn 5, how brave does he feel with that inside camber just kissing that curb on the apex, and doing the same for turn 6 there as well. So it's been a smart run so far from the Race Anywhere SimSport car. Now barreling their way down towards the Dunlop curve, using a bit of entry curb there, hitting that first apex, bringing it back for the second one to pick up nice speed. This has been a good run so far from the 49 car. This could very much put them in contention for challenging for pole through. The Schumacher S is really dancing with the limits there, almost putting a wheel in the gravel on the exit there, but just about managing to pull it back towards that left-hand side. Maybe a little bit cautious through turn 10, but sets himself up for a nice wide entry in towards 11, clips the apex curve, runs it out onto the exit curve, and carrying all that momentum with the V10 engine screaming behind him in the 49 cockpit there. Now all with it to do in the final chicane. How brave does he feel? Very late on the brakes, 50-metre board for Lindholm Andersen, and he absolutely flies his way through the chicane, using the exit curb through there in towards turn 15. Nicely hooked up on the exit there, and for Mats Lindholm Andersen in the Race Anywhere SimSport car, it looked pretty quick, and it goes only good enough for P2. So it looked like a good lap, and it was a pretty smart one, but only good enough to be just a tenth or so adrift from the Aston Martin of Leonardo Porco. And that just shows you how good the Aston Martin was for the number 3 car. Such a tidy lap, and absolutely extracted all the pace in that. So that really goes to show how quick that car is. But now it's over to Tadas Juknavicius in the number 9 Viva Greece racing car. Nicely through that opening sector, this car set the pace by 0.3 of a second in the pre-qualifying. Almost running wide though on the exit of turn 2 there. Nicely hooked up through turn 3, and you can see the Porsche showing all of its agility in the opening sector, and that flat 6 screaming behind Tadas as he now barrels on towards turn 5 then, using all of the entry curb on the run through there, and very tidy. How far to the left does he get? He runs in the middle of the road, and he's already on the power, so yeah, he's able to get a good exit with that car digging into the camber of the corner. The Porsche absolutely flying at the moment for Tadas. in towards Dunlop curve now, screaming his way through the downshift, playing with the gears through there. Maybe would have wanted to have been a bit tighter on the exit, but carried fairly good momentum on the run up towards now as Schumacher S's. How's he fare through here? Almost flat on the entry, the smallest of lists. He carries such great speed through there now in towards the next corner, turn 10, using that X-curve all the way over to the left-hand side, absolutely moving from one side of the track to the other, using all of the exit curve through 11. It's been a pretty tidy run once again for our pre-qualifier leader. What would it be for Tadas as he has one final run up towards chicane? Again, late on the brakes, a 50-meter board, bouncing through the curves, but again, he gets in nice and neat and tidy, using that exit curve to slingshot his way in towards turn 15. Is it going to be pole position for the number 9, or will it go to Leonardo Porco for number 3? And it does go towards the Porsche by a tenth and a half, a 53.217, faster than their team average in towards this qualifying session. And pole position and Superpole winning honours then does go to Tadas Uknavicius in the number 9 car, and it will be the Porsche then that leads away for the 10 hours of the Nürburgring circuit. And that is the Superpole session done and dusted with. What a fantastic series of laps for everybody. Only one failed attempt at a lap, unfortunately, for the 991 car, but generally there, everyone managing to execute a pretty decent lap. So Tadas Uknavicius for the number 9 team then goes into pole position for the 10 hours of Nürburgring. Leonardo Porco for Virtual Racing Team, they'll be happy with that one. Starts on the front row. Mats Linham Andersen goes into P3 in the 49 car for Race Anywhere Simsport. Matteo Sonotti in the 202 SPQ Racing Team car slots into P4. Joris Appel for the 444 current joint championship leaders starts in P5. Antonio Fedeli in the 127 John Lacey Esports Academy car starts P6. Marco Bancuso starts in P7, the 201, the other of our championship leaders. As then, everyone's falling off the timing board. Giuseppe De Anna, I think, was the next car for the 203 SPQ Racing Team. And then I believe they were followed up by the URL number 7 car for Marcin Oliars, and then the 991 team car there, taking the next grid spot. But that is it then for Superpole. We'll see if we manage to get someone in for an interview. And I do believe we do have Tadas in, so let's bring him in now. Tadas, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic lap there from you to go from being number 1 in the pre-qualifiers and then putting it all together in the Superpole session. You must be quite happy with that one.
Yeah, I'm very happy. Porsche in qualifying is very good, but in race it's quite dramatic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those cars that I think inherently it's always been one where you can really extract some fantastic pace out of it, but getting the consistency throughout the race, and when you've got 10 hours of racing to do, that can be a little bit tricky. And, you know, how are you feeling in that car? Maybe I won't push you to give too much away, obviously, to any of your competitors, but how are you feeling in terms of kind of different types of conditions and weather and fuel loads? Are you feeling confident going into this race, or are you a little bit nervous as to what surprises that Porsche could put up for you?
I mean, yeah, we will see what happens, but the weather is going to be crazy. We hope for rain because in dry Porsche is not really that good. And yeah, we will see what happens. Random clicking the setup this morning, so not quite confident, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think this is your first round of the season as well, so perhaps going into this kind of with not too many expectations or previous pressure from other rounds, but certainly getting yourself a pole position in the Superpole is the best way to start it. So wish you all the best of luck going into the 10 hours of Nürburgring in about 90 minutes time, and seeing whether or not you can bring that Porsche home for a victory on your debut of the series. So yeah, fantastic lap to you, Tadas, once again. Really class act of the Superpole session. Thanks for joining for an interview, and best of luck for later on.
Yep, thanks to you too.
Great to hear then from our Superpole winner for this session, and it will be a Porsche that leads away then for the 10 hours of Nürburgring. And I will put the link in the chat if I've done this correctly. I'm hoping, all things being well, that there is the link for part 1 of the session. The link for part 2 will go into the chat when we transition over for that. At the halfway point, it will be myself and Christian Romano that will take you through the first 5 hours of racing, and then it will be handing over to Timlin and Chinson for the remaining parts of the race. So we have lots of action going on here on the channel today to see how it all plays out for the top tier at the 10 hours of Nürburgring for round 3 of the Endurance Series. And that Superpole session gave us just a taste of the action that we can expect and all the thrills and spills that the Nürburgring circuit is likely to throw at our drivers. And with the possible horizon of changeable conditions and weather as well, it's going to be a very exciting race indeed. So look forward to seeing as many of you there joining us in the next 10 hours of racing, starting at 1 p.m. UK time. I think that is also now 1 p.m. GMT, if I've got that correct, but do not quote me. It's in UK time. We have all the clocks moving back and forth, so it does get a little bit confusing, but I do believe it is also 1 p.m. UTC as well. So join us in 90 minutes time for all of that action, and look forward to seeing you there for what is going to be 10 hours of incredible racing. So thank you everybody so much, and we'll speak to you soon. But for now then, it is goodbye.